The Lives of the Saints by Father Alban Butler, December 19th, Pope Blessed Urban V. Guillermo de Grimoard was born in Grisac in Languedoc in 1310. His father was a local nobleman, and his mother was a sister of Saint Eleazar of Sabran. After studying at the universities of Montpellier and Toulouse, William entered the order of Saint Benedict, where he was ordained a priest. He then returned to his former universities and went on to Paris and Avignon to obtain his doctorate. There he taught for some time. In 1352 he was appointed Abbot of St-Germain d'Auxerre. At that time the popes resided in Avignon. During the next 10 years, Abbot William served in various diplomatic missions for Innocent VI, who in 1361 appointed him Abbot of St. Victor of Marseille and sent him to Naples as legate to Queen Joan. William was there when he learned that Innocent had died and that he had been chosen to succeed him. He immediately returned to Avignon, where he was consecrated and crowned. He took the name Urban because all the pontiffs of that name had been saints. Urban V was the best of the Avignon popes. However, like most of them, he was too nationalistic to watch perfectly over the universal church, and it was impossible for him to uproot the abuses that swarmed around him. The great enterprise of his pontificate was his attempt to re-establish the papal see in Rome, but he failed. Indeed, in 1366, ignoring the opposition of the King of France and the French cardinals, he announced to the emperor that he was determined to move to Rome. In April of the following year, he left for Rome. At Carneto, many ecclesiastical and secular personages came out to greet him, a Roman embassy that gave him the keys of San Angelo, and Blessed John Colombini and the Jesuits with palms in their hands and hymns on their lips. 4 weeks later, Urban V entered Rome, where no pope had been for more than 50 years. Seeing the city, the pontiff could not hold back his tears. The great basilicas, including St. John Lateran and those of St. Peter and St. Paul, were almost in ruins. Urban V immediately set about repairing them and making the pontifical residences habitable. He also quickly took steps to restore discipline among the clergy and fervor among the people. In a short time, work was given to everyone, and food began to be distributed to the poor. The following year, the pontiff met with Emperor Charles IV. The Church and the Empire were again allied, and Charles entered Rome, leading by the bridle the mule on which the pontiff was riding. A year later, the Emperor of the East, John V Palaeologus, arrived in Rome, eager to put an end to the schism and to obtain the Pope's help against the Turks. Urban V received him on the steps of St. Peter's, but he could not help him, as he had enough to defend his own position. In fact, the pontiff had not succeeded in defeating the condottieri. Perugia had rebelled. France was at war with England. The French at the papal court were very unhappy, and the pope's health was beginning to fail. Urban V decided to return to France. The Romans begged him to stay. Petrarch became the spokesman of Italy to beg him not to leave. Saint Bridget of Sweden mounted her white mule and went from Montefiascone to prophesy to him that if he left Rome, he would die very soon, all in vain. In June 1370, Urban V declared before the Romans that he was leaving for the good of the Church and to go to help France. On December 5th, sad, sick, and very moved, he embarked for Carneto. God called him to himself on December 19th. Petrarch wrote, Urban would have been one of the most glorious of men if he had placed his deathbed before the altar of St. Peter's and had lain down on it with a good conscience, putting God as witness that if he came out of there it was not his fault, but the fault of those who had engaged in that shameful escape. But the Christians forgave the Pope that weakness. A chronicler of Mainz sums up the opinion of his contemporaries thus: he was a luminary of the world and a way of truth. He loved justice, fled from wickedness, and feared God. Urban V was free from the vices of his time and worked hard for the reform of the clergy, starting with his own court, where venality was a notorious thing. He supported many poor students and fostered knowledge by helping several universities, such as Oxford, and by procuring the foundation of new ones, such as those of Krakow and Vienna. The saint entrusted to the Dominicans of Toulouse the custody of the relics of St. Thomas and wrote to the university of that city, "We desire and command you to follow the doctrine of Blessed Thomas, which is true and Catholic, and to promote it as much as possible." Pilgrims began to flock to the tomb of Urban V in the Abbey of St. Victor in Marseille. Pope Gregory XI promised the King of Denmark, who had requested the canonization of Urban V, that the cause would be introduced. Although the times were very turbulent, the Christian people continued to worship the servant of God. Pius IX confirmed the cult of Blessed Urban in 1870. His name appears in the Roman calendar and in that of several dioceses of France.